Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Darcinovia here. I'm sorry for the multiple delays of this stream, but it's finally happening. This is my review on, hopefully, many episodes to come of Star Trek. Now, why am I doing the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation? Well, it won out in the polls of what am I going to review first, and I decided, you know what? I'm just going to review the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Now, I don't intend to review every episode of Star Trek. That's insane. And, that's like too much of an undertaking that I have no desire to do that. There are YouTubers that are far more qualified than me to do, an in-depth review on every episode, of Star Trek. Nothing much. I'm doing just fine. Just finally getting this stream off the ground. Now, how is this going to work? No, I won't be doing this for every Star Trek series I review episodes of. I'll probably just review a certain amount of episodes per season and just whether they're good or bad episodes and just give my opinions about it, why they're good and why they're bad, what works in the episodes and what doesn't work in the episodes. Hopefully, learning from this experience, I can use this in by the time Mandalorian season 3 or anything else comes out, I could actually do an actual video on these. So if I've practiced and perfected doing a single episode of a series by this point, it should be second nature to me. Now, Encounter at Farpoint aired in 1987, and it was almost 20 years since a new Star Trek episode aired. Star Trek at this point has had multiple, theatrical releases, and this was Star Trek's return to TV. Encounter at Farpoint, in my first viewing, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the craziness that Q introduced in the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. I think the actor that played Q is great. Pretty much every episode Q is in is probably one of my favorite episodes of the season. But when I look at this episode from an objective lens, it doesn't really hold up, really that well compared to the premieres of the original series, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. Because take out the Q portion of the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, the episode just doesn't hold up. And it's kind of boring, honestly, the premiere of Star Trek The Next Generation. Yes, it introduces like all of the characters that are going to play a central role for the next 7 seasons, but this episode doesn't really tell us anything about them, honestly. And the way the characters are like portrayed in this episode, it feels like the writers just had no idea what they wanted to do with most of the characters. Jean-Luc Picard just seems like, okay, here's this old guy that, is a commander of a starship. He doesn't like children, but that's all we know about him as a character. Riker, we know absolutely nothing about his character, except that he's the second in command. Geordi LaForge, barely nothing. We know little to nothing about this character. And this episode, in isolation, if you don't know anything about Star Trek, doesn't give you much about the characters in here. In fact, the only interesting character, if we're going to be objective here, is Data. Data, is introduced as an android. And of course, if you cannot tell by my icon, Data is my favorite character of Star Trek The Next Generation. and is the main reason why I got through the first 2 seasons of this show. Um, I think, certain aspects of it also have not aged well. Like, Diana Troy's costume. It's like, what the fuck? This is not practical. And I feel like, the episode feels so 80s sci-fi. I mean, Encounter at Farpoint is not a bad episode, but as far as season premieres goes for Star Trek The Next Generation, I think it didn't do the job that it set out to do, honestly. We barely know anything about the characters that are introduced. And I feel like the premiere of its peers did this much better. The original series in 50 minutes gave us everything we needed to know about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And it did it in the less time than this episode did, and which gave us barely anything. Data is like the only character that seems to be interesting in Star Trek The Next Generation. But then, to be fair on Encounter at Farpoint, the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation isn't that good, and neither is the second season. So the show hasn't reached its peak at this point. The show, basically, it's just trying to find its own footing, because the original series at this point, when the show was released, was considered a classic. And it's very difficult to live up to a classic like the original Star Trek series. And the episode, I guess, did do a decent job of basically building the blocks for future, episodes and future series. The Ferengi are mentioned in this episode for the first time. The Q continuum, it is mentioned and makes its first appearance. Q, who would become a recurring character and future Next Generation episodes and Star Trek Voyager. So, Encounter at Farpoint, isn't the best season premiere ever in Star Trek, nor is it the best series premiere, because other series that came after it did a better job of introducing the characters that you would be following for 7 years. Because in this era of Star Trek, start with the exception of Enterprise, would have 7 seasons each. The Encounter at Farpoint, I would probably give it a decent rating. It's not the best episode of Star Trek, nor is it the best Star Trek of The Next Generation. There's like so many freaking episodes I can list that are better, but that's a topic for another time. I know this is a short stream, but then again, this is a review of an episode, and there isn't much I can really talk about other than that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this short little stream. Have a good day, everyone, and may the Force be with you, and may we live long and prosper. Later.